Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah, Perek Aleph Halacha Hey. Hasher is a Pesach Bizmanlik. Somebody who thought it's a Pesach in its time. For you like Isaiah's Chametz B'Shusar Loiker. And he had a Isaiah in his possession. He gets Malchus. Shenema, because it says, L'sizbach al Chametz Dam Zivchi. You shall not slaughter on Chametz the blood of my offering. Now, we'll go to the Peirush. That this pasuk is found in Shmois Chov Gimel 18, and we find it in Mosdos 63a. The Rambam says it as one of the negative commandments at the beginning of the Korban Pesach, Hilchos Korban Pesach, and Sefer HaMitzvahs. It's brought down as Loisesa 115. In the Torah it says two times. This is one in Mishpotim. That's what the Rambam has brought down here. L'sizbach al Chametz Dam Zivchi. And one later in Parashat Kisisa, L'sishchat al Chametz Dam Zivchi. Even though Sizbach and Shishchat have the same meaning, it's two separate. That's the difference between the two. Here the Rambam says L'sizbach. That is the source. In the Gemara there's a disagreement. When are you chayav malchus? Who's chayav malchus? Huh? When and who is chayav malchus? So the Gemara says, "Kol chametz b'shus." Everybody has chametz. Is that when you chayav, or actually imay ba'azorah? Does it have to be with him in the azorah in the Beis Hamikdash? Rav Shimon Lakish says it has to be with him in the azorah. Rav Yochanan says anyone who has chametz in his rishus, even though he is not with him in the azorah, is chayav. Because Rav Yochanan is of the opinion that you can warn somebody. How do you know if somebody has chametz at his house? You can't make a warning to somebody. Don't do that unless you know for sure that he has it. And Hatorah Sofik means when you're not sure. Rabbi Yochanan is of the opinion that there's no liability involved of punishment. And the Rambam, it would seem that he passes like Rabbi Yochanan, that anyone who has chometz in his rishus is chayiv. Therefore, the Lechem Mishnah questions: you're not chayiv malchus without warning. The Rambam himself paskins that if you're not sure when you warn him that he's going to do something, it's not a warning. So how can he codify the halacha here? He gets chometz he gets malchus even on chometz which is not in the azorah. The Lechem Mishnah answers that the Rambam is talking about the person who warns him knows that he has chometz in his house, or one of the people in the chabura has chometz. Rabbi Akiva questions the Lechem Mishnah because in Hilchos Sanhedrin he writes, "Hasor Sofik is asro." The Pri Chodesh has this question about the Rambam. In one place he says Hasor Sofik is asro, and the other one says it's not. And the Pri Chodesh has the problem. He explains only a lav, which is specific in the Torah, the Rambam holds even on a questionable warning, it's considered a warning. But a lav that isn't mefurish, it's not considered a warning. And he proves this point from Shavuos, Perek Hey Halacha Beis. That you get malchus when there's no chometz in the azorah, is not mefurish in the Torah. But any questions on the Rambam, where does he come to make this differentiation, whether or not it has to be in the azorah or not? Since here it's not clear that where the chometz is, you can't warn to say, well, maybe it means in the house also. The Achronim question, why don't you get twice malchus, since there's two negative commandments, L'sizbach and L'sishchat? And they explain, the Orach Chodesh explains that you can rectify the lav of L'sizbach when you keep the mitzvahs asay that's close to it, and that therefore you would be ported for malchus because there are two lavim. The Rishon, it has a asay next to it, L'sizbach, and the Sheni says L'sishchat and chayav malchus. And since you have two lavim, the first one is nitik l'asay, and the second one is chayav malchus. Therefore, you only get malchus one time and not twice. Even though Rambam writes, it says like Sizbach, which is nita say, and should be mentioned like Sishchat, which is not nita say. It's Chayav Malchus. Still, that's what he means. But the Mahamshik asks the question: if that's the case, why in Sefer HaMitzvahs he doesn't count this Isser like two lavin, separate lavin? And he explains it according to the Rambam in his ninth route to the sources of when you count the mitzvah. That lavin that's mentioned a few times are considered like one lav. Another argument that people ask: you should be quoted from Malchus, the one who was over, because he didn't do anything. The one who didn't bring a korban chagiga, who went up Rae Gann, even though it says you're not allowed to come without a korban, still you're potter. And he questions, why are you loike on leaving chametz in your house when you didn't do any action? He explains, the Rebbe explains that the Issa is not on the leaving of the chametz, but on the shlit, and that is an action, and therefore you're chayiv on the chametz, on the slaughtering on the chametz. So Asemes gives a different answer, that after the slaughtering of the korban Pesach, there's no possibility to bring another korban, therefore you get malchus. But a korban chagiga, you can bring the entire regal, and if at the end he didn't bring, he didn't do an action, and therefore you don't get twice malchus. There's different shlitas at Pesach that by slaughtering on chometz, he loses out on the ability to bring another korban Pesach. According to the Mebina, you would get malchus because the action of the shlita is the isur. According to Sfas Emes, the reason for the malchus is that he did not get rid of the chometz at the time of the shlita. Now the Rambam continues. Who's liable for this? Both the one who slaughters and the one who places the blood on the mizbeach. It's Adam. And the one who brings up the evorim. It's Emur, the inside, the innards of the animal, the fats. If any of the above had chometz, even if the kohen does it and he's not from the bnei chabur, he's chayav. If any of them had a kazayas chometz v'shas hakravosei at the time that it was brought, harei loike. He gets malchus. Now, who is he? So Asemes questions: how do we know that the shiur is a kazayas? Even though there's no achila posmi kazayas, but the issue of leisishul al chometz davar zivchi has nothing to do with achila. And he explains that the Rambam is of the opinion that since they still say that the shiur on leaving chometz that is not an isra achila is a kezayas, therefore isra shchita would also be on chometz would be a kezayas. From the Rambam would sing those who bring the korban, they're the ones who receive malchus, even though it was in the rishus somebody else in the bnei chabur and not in the rishus. The Mari Cook it infers that as well, and Tosfos writes in Pesachim 63b that the Torah said it should not be slaughtered. Now, why should the one who has the chometz be chayav if he didn't slaughter? But the Chinuch writes the issur is leaving the chometz, whether he slaughters it or he doesn't, whether he's the shochet or he's one of the bnei chabur. He asks in the Hilchos Chinuch, why should the one who left it over get malchus? It's a lav that he didn't do anything. And even if he did do an action, the Chinuch's shita opinion is that if you can do it without an action, any lav that can be performed without an action, even if you do it with an action, you don't get malchus. And furthermore, he questions the Chinuch. Torah said lo yisishchat. It doesn't say lo yisishaher. It doesn't say don't leave it. So why do you say the Isser is leaving the chometz? Yeshua's Malka questions, why does somebody leave chometz Erev Pesach at the time of Shlitzah Pischoi? And the entire Bnei Chabura get malchus, even if we're talking about that the Shochet is the agent for the whole Bnei Chabura, and Yishlech L'Dvar Aveira. And the one who leaves the Chametz, or the Bnei Chabura, did not shecht it themselves. He explains the general rule that Ein Shlich L'Dvar Aveira is only when, without his shlichus, there wouldn't be an issur. But if we're going to say that even without his shlichus, he's over an issur, then there is a shlich L'Dvar Aveira. According to us, we can answer the two questions of Hilchos Chinuch. Since if he wouldn't be an agent, the shliach will be over because he slaughtered it on Chametz, even though he's not a shliach. And the one who left the Chametz also is over for leaving the Chametz, and he gets malchus. And since the shochet is the agent for the Bnei Chabura, it's as if all of them slaughtered it, the Pesach on Chametz. So we have two reasons why they are liable, because it's as if they did it, and they slaughtered it, and the person himself slaughtering it, even though Ein Shlich L'Dvar Aveira, but it says you're not allowed to slaughter. It doesn't say just the people who own the Chametz. Menachem Zemben is Sefer Zer Avram writes that the Chiddush of the Yeshus Malkei, the one who slaughters it, is a shliach of the entire Chabura, and therefore those who left the Chametz get malchus is only, if we'll explain, the Shluchah Shalom Gemoiser means that the person who does the action is literally the physical body of the people who send them. But if we'll say that the action itself is reckoned to be that of the sender, so you can't be Machayev, the one who sent Malchus, because he didn't do an action. It has nothing to do with the action. It has to do with being the sender. Furthermore, there are those who explain the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvahs that the Issa is only on the one who left the Chametz and not on the one who slaughters it. And the Likutei Halachos explains that there's no contradiction here, but rather the slaughterer or the one who brings the limbs on the Mizbeach are liable if they have Chametz in their rishus. And one of the Bnei Chabura has in his rishus Chametz is also gets malchus. So that's another way of looking at it, that not everybody gets malchus. There's a third opinion, which is that of Rashi and the Uraim, that all the Bnei Chabura are over on the Issa. So we have three opinions. Who is transgresses and lo yishchat. Rambam and Tosfos is that the one who leaves it is not over belav, only the one who slaughters or who places the blood. The chinuch, that a ben Chabura who leaves the Chametz gets malchus. The Rashi and Yereim have the opinion, and anybody who's from the Bnei Chabura that knows that one of them has Chametz gets also malchus. To go all your questions, if the Kohen who is Maktir, who brings it on the Mizbeach, also gets malchus, and he says this depends on his father's question, whether bringing the emurim is an obligation of the owner to the entire Bnei Chabura when one of them has the Kazayas Chometz. If it's from bringing the korban, even the Kohen is chayiv. But the Bailim that don't actually bring it do not get malchus. As far as the chiyuv of the Kohen who brings the blood, the Likutei Hilchos Chaim says that he's not over anything when there's chometz in the house of one of the Bnei Chabura. But the Meiri explains that even the one who takes the blood to the Mizbeach is also liable, and so it would seem in the Mechilta. The Rambam is medayik the Eid Pesach Zeh is loike. He doesn't say that you bring the Pesach Zeh, it gets malchus. To make a differentiation between the Korban Tom and the Bein HaAbayim. The Rambam is saying that the very fact of eating it, the ones who eat it are loike. That to make a differentiation, he's talking about Oichlan Pesach Zeh, is loike, to make a differentiation because you're really not supposed to shech the Tom Shel Bein HaAbayim on Chometz. Because Tosfos writes in Menachos, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, that somebody who shechs the Tom Shel Bein HaAbayim b'Yudal B'Nisan ala Chometz is loike, the Kohen is Zoyrek and Makriv is chayev only because he himself has Chometz, not on Chometz and Rishus in the Yisur. And the Griz explains, because Tomid is a korban tzibur, and it's impossible that the yochid should cause that tzibur should be liable. There's a special din. Avol, however, korban Pesach, he is a korban that everyone's obligated to bring by himself, and therefore he could be, the Rambam says, Orchlin Pesach Zeh, all those who are associated with it. That's why it's different from Tomid. So even the Tomid of Pesach, Erev Pesach, cannot be slaughtered on Chometz. Now the Achronim have a question. What happens if it's a woman who is the one who is has the Chometz, and she's on the Chabura? Is the Shechet or the Zorek Chayev for the Korban Pesach? The Avnei Nezer cites that since in Yudal Nisan after Tzorayim there's only an Aseh. Many hold that the whole Isser of Chometz Erev Pesach after Chatzos is only a positive command Tashbisu, because the Lava Bal Yeror Bal Yemot is only at night. So then it would depend if women are obligated in this positive commandment, because usually women are potter from a mitzvah seishas man gromo. And the Chinuch who writes that mitzvah zuna is noheges both by men and by women, and he writes that women are chayev, is of the opinion that the isser of leisishrat al chometz is a lav on the one who leaves it, and you transgress this negative commandment, even though the woman is not over anything on it. Interesting situation. She's not being over on chometz, but sishchat al chometz is a loiseser, and therefore, even though she's allowed to have the chometz, in other words, she doesn't transgress, she's not allowed to have it at the time, since she has it at the time of the slaughtering of the korban Pesach. Therefore, everyone transgresses. But Tosfos says that the one who slaughters it and the one who sprays the dam is over belav, and not the one who has it actually in the house. It could be, since the woman is potter, because she's not obligated to get rid of her. She doesn't transgress tashbisu, which is only on Erev Pesach. When she leaves it, the shoychet and the zorek are liable, and so the Avnei Nezer would assume that they are liable. Sovnas Paneach, one is of the opinion that even when it's chometz by the woman, and she's one of the members of the group, the Rambam is of the opinion that the Shochet and the Zorek transgress, because the Rambam places the Isser on the fact that there's Chometz and the Bnei Chabura, and he didn't make a difference between men and women. Furthermore, they question if a cotton who's listed on a Pesach, that he has in his Rishus, Chometz, will that also cause the Shochet to be over, because a cotton is not liable? And this is the question whether the cotton is considered one of the members, or just that he's permitted to eat from it, and whether celibate's obvious is deraisa and not a drabonin permission, and therefore that's a separate question, and it would depend as to whether the cotton is part of the group. This is found in the Dorim, the answer for it, and the Pesach is kosher. Even though it was slaughtered on Chometz, it's kosher. The case of Mishnah cites the Rambam that he proves this from a Gemara in 63a. When it says that the Malchus, it doesn't mention that the korban is posel. And Tosfos writes, in the name of the Rivo, that this is the Sefta in Psochim Perek Dalad Mishnah Dalad, where it says that even though the Shochet of the Pesach al Chometz in Yudal is over Sesa, the Pesach itself is kosher. You can fulfill your obligation. He also in the Yerushalmi, they darshan, they explain the posuk Dam Zivchi, that after you were over on the Leisesa, it's still called Zivchi. You see, it's still called the Torah refers to it as a korban, not as something which is posel, and you therefore fulfill your obligation. Now, the Tzlach learned in Rashi's opinion that Pesach becomes posel if you slaughtered it on the Chometz. But the Mishnah Lamelech recites the Yerushalmi that from what you see there you get Malchus. It shows that the korban is kosher, because it was nifsel. You didn't shecht a korban on the Chometz, and therefore you shouldn't get Malchus.